A lot of people spend years chasing higher income, without ever asking a much deeper question. How expensive is my life becoming underneath the surface? Because modern financial life often creates a strange illusion. As long as income keeps increasing, everything appears to be improving. Better apartment, better technology, better experiences, more convenience, more visible progress. And externally, those upgrades often look like success, but internally, something else can quietly begin happening at the same time. The cost of maintaining everyday life starts expanding faster than people realize, not just financially, psychologically, emotionally, structurally, and eventually many people reach a point where maintaining the structure itself becomes exhausting. Not because they failed, because the structure quietly became heavier over time. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston, your synthetic financial educator. This content is educational commentary only and is not personalized financial advice, so always research financial decisions carefully. One of the most important things to understand about modern financial life is that expensive living is not always obvious. Sometimes expensive living looks luxurious, but other times it simply looks normal. That distinction matters, because normalization is one of the most powerful forces shaping financial behavior underneath daily life. Human beings adapt to improved conditions extremely quickly. A convenience initially feels exciting. Then eventually it feels standard. A larger space initially feels rewarding. Then eventually it simply feels normal. And once expectations normalize upward, the structure surrounding daily life often expands quietly alongside them. Now, this process rarely happens dramatically. That's what makes it difficult to recognize emotionally while it's happening. Lifestyle expansion usually develops through accumulation. One recurring payment, one convenience upgrade, one additional subscription, one slightly more expensive standard repeated across years. And individually, most of those decisions feel completely manageable. That's the important part. Financial pressure rarely develops through one catastrophic choice. It usually develops through repeated normalization operating quietly over time. Now, another reason expensive living becomes difficult to recognize is because modern systems increasingly disconnect spending from emotional visibility. Automatic payments, subscription ecosystems, deferred payment systems, monthly financing structures, all of these reduce friction. And reduced friction changes awareness automatically. The easier something becomes to maintain emotionally, the easier it becomes to normalize psychologically. Now, eventually, recurring obligations stop feeling like active financial decisions at all. They simply become background structure. And once financial systems move into the background psychologically, people stop evaluating the full weight of the structure surrounding daily life. Now, this creates something important emotionally. People begin organizing financial life around maintaining the existing structure rather than increasing flexibility, maintaining the apartment, maintaining the subscriptions, maintaining the vehicle, maintaining the convenience systems, maintaining continuity itself. And once maintaining continuity becomes the primary emotional goal, financial life often becomes increasingly pressure-sensitive underneath the surface. Now, this doesn't mean enjoying comfort is wrong. Comfort matters. Convenience matters. Quality of life matters. The deeper issue is structural dependency, because systems requiring continuous maintenance naturally reduce flexibility over time. And flexibility matters more than many people initially realize, because flexibility quietly affects emotional experience itself. Unexpected expenses feel heavier once margins narrow. Career changes feel riskier once obligations expand. Uncertainty feels more stressful once future income becomes heavily committed before arrival. Now, another important layer here involves cognitive load, because expensive living is not only financial, it is attentional. The larger and more complex the structure becomes, the more mental energy is required to maintain it continuously. More payments, more tracking, more recurring systems, more financial coordination operating constantly underneath everyday life. And over time, structural complexity quietly increases emotional fatigue. Now, modern convenience systems amplify this dramatically, because convenience often reduces short-term effort, while increasing long-term dependency underneath the surface. Food delivery systems, subscription ecosystems, immediate financing, automatic renewals, all of these make life easier in the present moment. But collectively, they also expand recurring structural complexity over time. And complexity itself creates pressure, especially once people stop recognizing how large the structure surrounding daily life has quietly become. Now, another reason expensive living becomes psychologically powerful is because comparison quietly normalizes higher-cost lifestyles continuously. Modern environments constantly expose people to curated versions of comfort and success, upgraded homes, luxury experiences, convenience-focused living, visible consumption presented as emotionally standard. And over time, repeated exposure quietly changes expectation. Not because people consciously choose comparison constantly, because human beings naturally adapt to surrounding environments psychologically. Now, eventually, many people stop evaluating whether certain lifestyle systems actually increase long-term well-being structurally. Instead, those systems simply become emotionally expected. And once expectations normalize, reducing them later often feels emotionally uncomfortable. Not impossible, but uncomfortable. Because downward adjustment after adaptation feels psychologically heavier than people initially expect. Now, another important factor here is speed. Modern financial life moves quickly. Payments happen automatically. Purchases happen instantly. Convenience arrives immediately. And over time, fast-moving systems reduce reflection. People spend less time evaluating the full structure surrounding their lives calmly. Not because they are unintelligent, because fast systems reduce pause moments, and pause moments matter psychologically. Because pauses create space for awareness. Without pauses, systems become easier to normalize automatically. Now eventually, many people begin experiencing something emotionally confusing. Life externally appears improved, while internally feeling increasingly fragile. Not because visible success is fake, but because structural dependency expanded alongside visible improvement. That distinction matters enormously, because visible success and structural stability are not always identical realities underneath the surface. A person can appear financially successful externally, while privately feeling trapped by the size and complexity of the structure surrounding daily life. Now, another important layer appears once recurring obligations begin influencing decision-making itself. Because obligations quietly shape future choices automatically, the larger the recurring structure becomes, the more uninterrupted income continuity begins mattering emotionally. And once uninterrupted continuity becomes emotionally necessary, flexibility naturally narrows. Career flexibility narrows. Risk tolerance narrows. Recovery flexibility narrows. Not dramatically at first, gradually. And gradual systems are often the hardest systems to recognize while they're operating. Now, this doesn't happen because people are irresponsible. Modern financial systems increasingly reward expansion, bigger lifestyles, more convenience, more visible upgrades, more recurring engagement, and repeated engagement becomes highly profitable structurally. Again, this is not about conspiracy, it's about incentives. Systems naturally evolve toward repeatable behavior, because repeatable systems reduce uncertainty. But repeatable obligations also quietly reshape emotional experience over time. Now, another important reason expensive living feels emotionally confusing is because many upgrades genuinely do improve comfort temporarily. That's important to acknowledge honestly. A better environment can improve life. Certain conveniences genuinely reduce stress. The deeper issue is cumulative structural dependency, because eventually many people stop distinguishing between things that improve life and systems that require continuous maintenance. And once those two become emotionally blended together, financial structures often expand automatically underneath awareness. Now, none of this means people should reject comfort or intentionally live without enjoyment. That's not realistic. And it's not the point. The goal is understanding how recurring structural expansion quietly changes emotional experience over time. Because systems become most powerful once they stop attracting conscious attention. Now, if you step back and observe the broader structure, something important becomes very clear. Lifestyle expansion increases recurring obligations. Recurring obligations increase structural complexity. Structural complexity reduces flexibility. Reduced flexibility increases dependence on continuity. and eventually maintaining the structure itself becomes emotionally exhausting underneath the surface, which means expensive living is not always about visible luxury alone. Sometimes expensive living simply means carrying a structure that requires enormous ongoing maintenance to sustain continuously. Now, understanding this should not create guilt. Guilt rarely improves awareness. The goal is perspective, because perspective changes observation. Instead of evaluating financial life only through visible upgrades or visible income, you begin noticing structural systems operating underneath daily behavior. Complexity patterns, normalization patterns, dependency patterns, flexibility patterns, and once those systems become visible, financial life becomes easier to analyze more calmly, not emotionally, more structurally. You begin noticing how recurring obligations quietly shape emotional pressure, how convenient systems increase complexity over time, how visible success and structural freedom are not always the same thing underneath the surface. And awareness matters because systems become easier to evaluate once they stop feeling invisible. Not instantly, not perfectly, but progressively. Because visibility changes perspective, and perspective changes attention. Now, financial life is rarely shaped by one dramatic event. It is usually shaped through repeated systems operating quietly beneath everyday awareness. Small upgrades, small recurring commitments, small normalized adjustments repeated consistently across years. And once those patterns become visible, financial pressure often starts making more sense structurally. Because the deeper issue is usually not one isolated purchase, but the accumulated weight of systems requiring continuous maintenance underneath everyday life. And understanding that changes how financial stability itself gets interpreted over time. Less performatively, more structurally, more intentionally. Because modern financial life often rewards expansion visibly, while quietly reducing flexibility invisibly underneath the surface. And recognizing that difference changes how people begin evaluating financial success itself. That concludes today's lesson. Peace. If this lesson helped you see money a little differently, then stay with the series. Because financial understanding is not built from one idea. It is built layer by layer. One system, one pattern, one hidden behavior at a time. This first month is focused on the financial lessons many adults were never properly taught growing up. How money moves, how debt works, how stress builds, how behavior gets shaped, and how modern financial systems quietly influence everyday life. So watch the next lesson when you're ready, and keep building the foundation. This is Streetwise Wealth Academy. I'm Winston. Peace.